A single joke by Queen Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, has triggered a wave of backlash that's now reached Buckingham Palace. His offhand remark about becoming a prince, and the public storming the gates if it happened, quickly went viral, sparking fierce debate over royal titles, privilege, and perception. As the uproar grew, Prince Edward quietly stepped in behind the scenes, signaling just how seriously the palace views even the smallest cracks in royal protocol. This isn't just noise. It's a warning. Palace shock. Camilla's son triggers new palace crisis. It started with a podcast, casual, unscripted, and one offhand remark that landed like a thunderclap inside Buckingham Palace. Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's eldest son from her first marriage, laughed mid-conversation and said, "If I became a prince, they'd probably storm the gates of Buckingham Palace." He chuckled as he said it. But the public didn't. The comment, once clipped and shared, spiraled across headlines and timelines within hours. From tabloids to talk shows, everyone was asking the same thing. Was this just a joke or something more? Suddenly, Tom, usually a quiet private figure who steered well clear of royal politics, was front and center in a storm about titles, boundaries, and the deep question of what royal blood really means in today's world. "It was a throwaway line," said one close producer who worked on the podcast. But it hit a nerve, because it pointed to something deeper. That something deeper was the idea that Camilla's children, though not born into the Windsor line, had now reached such proximity to the throne that their public words could spark national conversation. For years, Camilla's family remained just outside the royal perimeter, present at key events, yes, Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, King Charles's coronation, but never actively involved in the institution. The public and the press respected that boundary. Now, that boundary felt like it was quietly being tested, not by a formal statement, not by a royal decree, but by a laugh, a joke, a casual comment that hinted at the idea of a prince's title landing where tradition says it shouldn't. The palace, true to form, issued no official response. But behind the scenes, aides reportedly scrambled to assess the impact. Phone calls were made. Press officers were briefed. A senior courtier reportedly told a journalist off-record, "There's no plan for title changes. That's not even a conversation. But perception matters. And this one is tricky." That word, perception, became key. It wasn't about what was said officially or what was never going to happen. It was about how people saw the monarchy, the rules, the privileges, the gatekeepers. If a non-royal son could make a joke about being made a prince and spark public fury, then clearly the line between royal and almost royal was thinner than many assumed. The palace had weathered louder storms in the past, but this one cut deep in a quieter way. Not scandalous, but symbolic. And as the moment grew online, it raised a new question echoing across newsrooms and dinner tables alike. Who is Tom Parker Bowles, and why do his words now carry so much weight? That question, once unthinkable in royal circles, was about to be answered in full view of the country. Who is Tom Parker Bowles, and why his words matter? Tom Parker Bowles is not a prince. He doesn't carry a royal title, doesn't wave from palace balconies, and doesn't speak on behalf of the crown. But his name, and more importantly, his blood tie to Queen Camilla, means he exists in a gray space, not royal by birth, but undeniably close to the throne. The eldest child of Camilla and her first husband, Andrew Parker Bowles, Tom is best known as a respected food critic and author. He's built his own career in publishing, judging food competitions, and writing columns. For years, he's stayed clear of anything remotely political or regal. "Tom's always kept his own career and distance from royal duties," said a longtime friend from the publishing world. But that surname, Parker Bowles, still carries weight, especially now. That weight has grown heavier since Camilla became queen consort. Though Tom holds no position within the monarchy, his proximity to it has changed. He's been seen at major royal events, standing quietly alongside his mother and stepfather. At Queen Elizabeth II's state funeral, he was there. At King Charles III's coronation, he had a front-row seat. But presence and power are not the same. And until now, Tom had never stepped close to the lines of royal protocol. That changed the moment he joked about becoming a prince. The remark, meant as self-deprecating humor, was simple. "If I became a prince, they'd probably storm the gates of Buckingham Palace." It was a casual line during a relaxed podcast conversation. But once shared, it became something far more loaded. Suddenly, people began to question not just Tom's role, but what it means to be part of the royal family in today's world. Can someone so close to the monarch joke about gaining a title? What does that say about how the institution draws its lines? "It's not just what he said, it's when he said it," noted a royal commentator. The monarchy is in a very delicate moment. It's modernizing, but carefully. When someone that close to the Queen makes light of titles, even in jest, it stirs something bigger. The timing couldn't have been worse. As King Charles works to slim down the monarchy and focus on core working royals, any suggestion of expanding the circle, even jokingly, risks public backlash. The phrase "storming the gates" triggered a strong emotional reaction. It struck a nerve about entitlement, exclusivity, and whether lines of heritage are being blurred. What could have been a quiet, forgettable podcast appearance had now become a national headline and a public headache for the palace. Tom Parker Bowles may not wear a crown, but in this moment his voice carried far further than expected. And now, the country was asking, if even he can stir this level of uproar, what does that say about how fragile royal perception has become? The shockwave from that one comment only intensified once the exact words were repeated across social media, newsrooms, and kitchen tables. Because while Tom may have laughed, the public response was anything but lighthearted. The controversial comment: storming Buckingham Palace. On the surface, Tom Parker Bowles's comment sounded like typical British humor, dry, ironic, and quickly brushed aside. "They'd storm the gates if I became a prince," he said with a half-laugh. It was delivered offhandedly, in the relaxed tone of a podcast. But once those words were out in the world, their meaning shifted. The joke took on a life of its own. It was clipped, reposted, headlined, and soon it stopped sounding like a joke to many. Instead, it tapped into a growing public unease about royal roles, privilege, and where the line should be drawn. It's the kind of line you say with a smile, but everyone hears it differently, one royal observer noted. What Tom may have intended as self-mockery, the public heard as either entitlement or truth wrapped in sarcasm. The phrase "storm the gates" was especially jarring. It painted a picture of rebellion, even violence, in the context of privilege gone too far. Some commentators didn't hear a joke at all. They heard a quiet warning. It wasn't just a throwaway line, it was also a sign of awareness, said a former palace staffer. He knows the weight of titles. He knows how people feel about privilege being stretched too far. That comment was telling. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Tom Parker Bowles. It was about a system that's long struggled to define who is in and who is out. A non-blood relative, joking about becoming a prince, raised questions about boundaries that have always been fiercely protected. The monarchy, especially under King Charles, is trying to slim down, to keep the focus on working royals and the immediate line of succession. But this comment put the idea of expansion back into the spotlight, even if just by accident. It's not the first time a royal-adjacent comment caused a stir, one media analyst said, but this spread faster than most because it echoed a real concern. How close is too close when it comes to the crown? The discussion exploded online. News anchors debated it. Opinion writers broke it down. And social media turned the phrase "storming the gates" into memes, mock headlines, and a flood of commentary. But under the humor, something serious was happening. The monarchy was once again facing public pressure to explain who gets what and why. And that's when attention turned quietly to the one royal who often surfaces during tense moments like these: Prince Edward. He's not flashy, but he is trusted, a voice of tradition who knows how to steady the waters without making noise. As the debate over Tom's joke grew louder, Edward's presence behind the scenes became more important than ever. Because when perception starts to slip, it's the firm hands in the background who are expected to pull things back into balance. Prince Edward steps in. A senior royal's response. Prince Edward has never been one to chase headlines. The youngest child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, he has quietly built a role for himself as a stabilizer, a royal who stays away from drama but knows exactly when to step in. So when online whispers suggested that Edward had privately addressed the fallout from Tom Parker Bowles' controversial comment, those within palace circles didn't raise an eyebrow. Edward is the calm voice when things get messy, one royal insider said. He doesn't do drama, but he does step in when tradition needs defending. There was no statement, no official correction. Instead, the response was carried through whispers, discreet conversations with aides, a firm nod to staff, a quiet word shared during a scheduled engagement. In the world of the royals, silence can be louder than words. Edward's involvement didn't need confirmation. His reputation made the message clear. Sources close to the palace suggested that Edward's presence behind the scenes served a specific purpose: to remind everyone, including Camilla's extended family, that the monarchy operates on structure, not personality. Titles, status, and the legacy of the crown are not subjects for casual commentary, even from those who sit near the throne at family dinners. His role isn't to scold, explained one courtier. It's to protect the crown's balance. Edward knows where the lines are, and when they start to blur, he draws them again, quietly, but firmly. Even the idea of Edward stepping in, whether the rumor was fully accurate or not, spoke volumes. It showed how seriously the palace regarded the public's reaction to Tom's joke. The uproar wasn't just about a podcast line, it was about boundaries, symbols, and how the monarchy is perceived in a world that now hears every word instantly and reacts even faster. More than anything, Edward's presence served as a signal, not just to Tom, but to all those watching from inside and outside the palace gates. Some lines cannot be crossed. Not in jest, not in passing, not when the institution is still holding on to the fine thread of public trust. And at the heart of it all was a growing realization. This wasn't just about one man's comment. It was about how modern voices, even unintentionally, could reshape the image of the monarchy. Could a joke redefine tradition? Could casual speech loosen the grip of legacy? Those are the questions the palace now faces, and they lead directly into a much deeper challenge, one that's quietly growing louder with every public moment. How does the monarchy hold its history? while meeting the expectations of a changing world? Royal tradition versus public expectation. For centuries, the British monarchy has limited the number of princes and princesses to preserve its structure. Titles are not handed out lightly, and bloodline matters. Tom, no matter how close to the Queen, isn't part of that lineage. "This isn't about liking someone," said one royal historian. "It's about precedent. If Tom was given a title, even as a joke, it would open the floodgates." The public knows this. That's why Tom's comment caused such a stir. Some found it funny. Others feared it hinted at something real. In truth, it reopened an old wound: the tension between preserving heritage and adapting to a modern world. The monarchy must always walk a fine line. And now, thanks to a single sentence on a podcast, it's facing that line again, and deciding how much to say, and how much to let fade into silence. That silence, by the way, wasn't accidental. It was part of a plan. Palace communications strategy after the incident. As headlines swirled and the podcast clip went viral, Buckingham Palace did what it often does in times like this. Nothing. No press release, no correction, no public reaction. Instead, the palace fell back on its long-used method of handling unwanted noise: silence. Once you respond, you give weight to the comment, a former royal communications aide explained. Silence can often say more than words. It's about control. Behind the scenes, though, sources say the palace's media team was fully engaged, monitoring the headlines, tracking the comments' reach on social media, briefing senior staff, and, quietly, reminding key outlets that Tom Parker Bowles is not a working royal, nor does he speak for the monarchy. The internal goal was clear: distance the crown from the controversy without fueling it. "You don't want to amplify a joke by denying it," said a media analyst. "But you want to make sure it doesn't grow legs." At the same time, courtiers were said to be reinforcing an old but firm rule: royal titles are not for casual speculation. That applies even more when the person speaking isn't part of the royal line. Even jokes can start fires, especially in a climate where public trust in institutions is fragile. The strategy worked, to an extent. The story peaked online within 48 hours, then began to fade. But the palace knew that, even after the headlines move on, public perception stays behind. And online, the public had plenty to say. That reaction, both serious and satirical, took on a life of its own. Public reaction and social media buzz. Online platforms exploded with takes, some laughing, some angry, some confused. TikTok was flooded with memes of people storming the gates in dramatic fashion, while others used the clip to ask, "Who really deserves royal titles?" "I don't care how well-spoken he is, he's not a prince," one user posted. Another wrote, "Finally, someone in the royal circle gets how ridiculous titles can be." It was a split reaction. Some saw Tom's joke as refreshing honesty, a kind of rare, self-aware, royal-adjacent voice. Others took it as a sign of creeping privilege, a warning that even non-blood relatives might one day expect something they're not owed. "People love to joke about the royals until it feels too real," said a British columnist. This was one of those moments. What made the comment go so far was how relatable it was. Most people don't know royal protocol, but they know what entitlement sounds like. And even if Tom wasn't being serious, the possibility lingered. Could Camilla's children be drawn further into royal roles just by association? The fact that this was even being discussed publicly, let alone joked about, meant one thing: The line between royals and their extended families had blurred more than many realized. And that brings us back to Prince Edward, and what his presence in this story really signals. What Prince Edward's involvement symbolizes. Prince Edward rarely makes headlines. That's by design. He's known inside the family as someone who doesn't chase attention, but quietly holds the monarchy's shape. So when word spread that Edward had stepped in, even informally, to address the tone of Tom Parker Bowles's comment, it was taken seriously. Even the rumor of his involvement carried weight. "Edward is the monarchy's anchor," said a palace staffer. "He reminds everyone what the crown is built on." His history proves it. He took over Prince Philip's Duke of Edinburgh title. He performs duties without scandal. He and his wife, Sophie, are trusted by both King Charles and the public. In moments like this, Edward doesn't issue statements, he sets tone. By stepping in, Edward was sending a quiet message. Lines still exist, and not everyone belongs within them. His involvement was less about Tom directly and more about protecting the institution from casual erosion. It was also a reminder that, in the post-Elizabeth era, figures like Edward carry forward the spirit of duty without distraction. As the monarchy continues to modernize, it still needs people to say, "Not everything changes." That need for balance is now becoming one of the Crown's biggest challenges, especially when the next generation is watching. Long-term impact on royal titles and legacy. Tom Parker Bowles's podcast comment may have been off the cuff, but its ripple effect was real. It brought attention to something the palace has long tried to manage carefully: how royal titles are seen by the public. "We used to think titles were untouchable," said one royal commentator. "Now, even a joke about them feels like a provocation." The monarchy is under pressure to evolve, to seem modern, relatable, accessible. But the minute that evolution touches titles, people pay close attention. There's a fine line between adapting and overextending. This moment reinforced something the palace already knew. The British public is sensitive to the idea of who deserves royal status. Camilla's children, while respected, are not royal by blood. Any perceived shift toward title elevation, even as a joke, stirs public anxiety about privilege, fairness, and legacy. The palace is likely to react by doubling down on clarity. Titles will stay where they are. The crown will continue to focus on its working royals. And comments like Tom's? They'll be handled quietly, behind doors, with firm reminders. Moments like this shape policy, even without being official, a royal insider said. It's not about what's said, it's about what's learned. In the end, this was more than a joke gone viral. It was a reminder that even those on the edges of royalty still carry the power to shift public opinion. And in today's world, perception shapes legacy. What remains clear is that the crown will always protect its center. The gates of Buckingham Palace may never be stormed, but the battle for what the monarchy means in modern Britain is already at the door. The monarchy has always been defined by its boundaries: who belongs, who represents, and who stays respectfully outside the royal frame. Tom Parker Bowles's comment, though made in jest, exposed how fragile those lines have become in the public eye. It forced the palace to reckon, once again, with the cost of blurred roles and unguarded words. Prince Edward's quiet involvement wasn't just about damage control. It was a defense of tradition, a reminder that not every name linked to the crown holds royal weight. This incident won't reshape the monarchy overnight, but it will linger. It will influence how the palace communicates, how closely it guards royal identity, and how seriously even a joke is now taken. In today's world, where perception can shift faster than protocol, the monarchy must choose each step carefully. And when tradition is tested, it's the steady hands like Edward's that keep the crown steady.